At 24, I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. My husband, Chris, 33, has always been amazing. Yes, there's a big age gap between us, but he's youthful, both in looks and personality. We met on my birthday at a bar, and from that moment, life with him had been incredible. He made me laugh until I cried, showered me with love, and always made me feel like I was the center of his world. When we got married 2 years ago, I was sure I had hit the jackpot. My friends envied our relationship, often calling Chris the perfect husband. And for the longest time, I believed that too. He never raised his voice at me, never ignored me, and always seemed genuinely excited to see me at the end of the day. But yesterday, everything changed. I left work early because I wasn't feeling well. Normally, I'd be home by 4 o'clock, but that day, I pulled into our street around 2:30. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the neighborhood was. Kids were still in school, and most of the parents weren't home from work yet. Then, as I was driving past our neighbor's house, I saw a man leaving their front door. It's a family with a college-aged daughter, Rachel. She stood at the doorway, looking up at him with a bright, affectionate smile. I watched as she leaned in and kissed him goodbye. I assumed it was her boyfriend, until he turned around. It was Chris. My heart dropped into my stomach. I slammed on the brakes and parked down the street before he could see me. For a second, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was someone who looked like him. Maybe I was just overthinking. But as I watched him casually stroll back to our house, our home, our supposed safe place, like nothing had happened, reality hit me like a freight train. Chris was cheating on me. I couldn't go inside. Instead, I drove to a park, parked the car, and just sat there, staring blankly ahead. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I tried to breathe, but each inhale felt tight, constricted. My mind raced with a million questions. How long had this been going on? Was it a one-time thing? Was I blind this whole time? Had I just been too trusting? Too naive? Tears blurred my vision as I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I wanted to scream, to break something, to march back home and demand the truth. But I knew Chris. He was smooth. He would find a way to twist things, to make me doubt what I had just seen with my own eyes. So instead, I pulled myself together. I wiped my face, fixed my makeup in the rearview mirror, and went home. Pretending, acting like everything was normal. When I walked in, Chris greeted me with his usual warmth. "Hey, babe. You're home early. You feeling okay?" He placed a kiss on my forehead, his hands firm and steady on my waist. I wanted to recoil. He made dinner, rubbed my feet, and told me he loved me, just like he always did. But now? It all felt dirty, deceptive, a lie. That night, I barely slept. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything over and over. Every touch, every kiss, every "I love you" felt tainted. The next morning, after Chris left for work, I did something I never thought I would. I searched his laptop. I felt sick to my stomach as I opened it, but I had to know. I had to be sure. At first, everything seemed normal. Work emails, random web searches. But then, I found a text thread. Rachel's name stared back at me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I clicked on it. The messages weren't long, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. Had a great time today. Can't wait to see you again soon. Be careful. She's smart. She might catch on. I nearly dropped the laptop. It was true. Chris, the man who swore he adored me, was sneaking around with a girl barely out of high school. I could feel my hands trembling as I scrolled further, but most of the messages were short, careful, almost cryptic. He was being cautious. He knew what he was doing was wrong. That night, I watched him like a hawk. Every word, every movement. How could he sit beside me, hold my hand, kiss me like nothing had changed? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew he would deny it. He'd lie, gaslight me, make me question myself. I needed more. 2 nights later, he told me he had to work late. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but now, I was suspicious. "Want me to bring you dinner at the office?" I asked casually, testing him. For just a split second, his face froze. It was quick, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Oh no, don't worry about it," he said too quickly. "I'll probably just grab something with the team." That was all the confirmation I needed. As soon as he left, I grabbed my keys and followed him. I kept a few cars behind, my heart racing as I gripped the steering wheel. I half expected him to actually go to the office, for this all to be some terrible misunderstanding. But when he turned down a quiet street and parked in front of Rachel's house, my stomach twisted. I watched as he walked up to the door and let himself in, like it was routine, like he belonged there. I wanted to burst in, to scream at both of them. But instead, I waited. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Minutes passed, then an hour. I imagined what was happening inside. Was he kissing her? Touching her? Whispering the same sweet nothings he used to whisper to me? When Chris finally came out, it was nearly midnight. I watched as he kissed Rachel on the forehead before heading back to his car. That was it. I had seen enough. I drove home before him, my mind spinning with thoughts of revenge, of confrontation, of escape. But by the time I pulled into our driveway, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want excuses. I wanted out. The next morning, before Chris even woke up, I packed a bag. He stirred as I zipped it up. "Where are you going?" he mumbled sleepily. I turned to face him. He looked so normal, so oblivious, lying there in our bed, the same bed he had betrayed me in. "I know," I said simply. His eyes flickered open. "Know what?" "Rachel." His entire body tensed. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Babe, what are you talking about?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't. I saw you. I read the messages. I followed you." Chris paled. "It's not what you think. Save it." I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder. I deserve better. And with that, I walked out the door. For the first time in days, I felt free. An hour later, he emerged. Rachel followed him to the door, laughing. They looked so comfortable, so natural, like two people who belonged together. And then, I saw it. A kiss. Not a friendly peck on the cheek. Not a casual goodbye. But something deeper. Intimate. Lingering. I froze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My breath caught in my throat, and for a split second, my brain refused to process what my eyes had just witnessed. But there was no denying it. My husband was cheating on me. The weight of the realization settled in my chest like a boulder, crushing the air out of my lungs. My heart shattered into a million jagged pieces, each one cutting deeper than the last. I drove away, my vision blurred by tears, barely able to see the road. I don't even remember how I made it home. One moment, I was parked outside Rachel's house, my world crumbling, and the next, I was sitting in my living room, staring blankly at the wall. I wanted to call someone, my mom, my best friend, anyone. But what would I say? That my marriage, the life I had built with Chris, was a lie? That the man I loved, the man I trusted, had betrayed me? I couldn't do it. I couldn't say the words out loud. Because once I did, it would make it real. Hours passed, but I stayed frozen in place. The house was too quiet, too still. I used to love the peacefulness of our home, but now it felt suffocating. Then the front door opened. Chris walked in, tossing his keys on the counter like it was any other night. He smiled at me, his expression relaxed, his demeanor normal. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and asked, "How was your day?" I nearly laughed. How was my day? I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that I knew, that I had seen everything. But I swallowed the words, forcing myself to stay calm. Instead, I watched him closely. He sat on the couch, flipping through channels, completely unbothered. I studied his every move, the way he casually checked his phone, the slight smirk that played on his lips as he typed out a message. Was he texting her? Telling her he missed her? The thought made my stomach turn. That was it. That was the moment I knew. I was done being in the dark. The next morning, after a night of little sleep and too many painful thoughts, I made a decision. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of a divorce attorney. The words felt foreign as I spoke them out loud. My husband is cheating on me, and I don't know what to do. The attorney was calm, patient. She walked me through my options, how to gather more evidence, how to protect myself financially, and what steps I needed to take to prepare for the inevitable. It was overwhelming, but it was also the first time in days that I felt a sense of control. But knowing what to do and actually doing it were two very different things. I spent the next few days carefully observing Chris, and the more I paid attention, the more obvious it became. I noticed how he glanced at his phone and grinned at messages he never shared, how he stepped outside for work calls that lasted too long, how his schedule was suddenly unpredictable, late nights, early mornings, vague excuses. The lies were everywhere. So I started documenting everything. What time he left, what time he came back, what he said he was doing versus what I knew to be the truth. Every little inconsistency, every little red flag. I even took discreet screenshots of messages when he left his phone unattended. But I needed something undeniable, something concrete. So I hired a private investigator. It felt like a drastic step, something out of a movie, but I had to be sure. I had to be ready. It didn't take long. Within days, the investigator sent me photos. Chris and Rachel, holding hands, sitting too close at a restaurant, disappearing into a hotel together. I stared at the images, my stomach churning. I had already known, had already seen them together with my own eyes, but this was different. This was proof. There was no excuse he could give, no lie he could spin. The pain was unbearable, but at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief. The guessing, the wondering, it was over. Now, it was time for action. I wasn't going to confront him at home, where he could manipulate the situation or gaslight me into doubting myself. No, I needed a place where he couldn't escape the truth. So I invited him to dinner. I chose a nice restaurant, one we had gone to for anniversaries, for birthdays, a place filled with memories of who we used to be. He arrived, smiling, greeting me with a kiss on the cheek, as if he hadn't just spent the afternoon in another woman's arms. I played along, forcing small talk, waiting for the right moment. Halfway through dinner, when he was relaxed, thinking everything was normal, I reached into my purse and pulled out the photos. I slid them across the table. Chris picked them up, his expression shifting from confusion to horror in seconds. His face drained of color. "Care to explain?" I asked, my voice calm, steady. He swallowed hard. It's not what it looks like." I tilted my head, studying him. "Really?" "Because it looks like you've been sleeping with Rachel." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I know everything, Chris." And for the first time, he had nothing to say. The silence between us stretched. He looked around the restaurant, as if searching for an escape, as if hoping the walls would swallow him whole. But there was no way out. I had seen enough. By the time we left the restaurant, he knew. I wasn't staying. I wasn't forgiving. I was done. The next morning, I filed for divorce. I packed my things, leaving behind everything that no longer belonged in my future. Chris begged. He pleaded. He swore he had made a mistake, that it had meant nothing, that he still loved me. But love doesn't look like deceit. Love doesn't look like betrayal. And I deserved better. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of grief, moments where I wondered if I should have fought harder for our marriage. But every day that passed, I felt lighter, stronger, and for the first time in a long time, I was finally free. How did you like today's story? Have you ever experienced something similar or known someone who has? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more gripping tales like this one. Your support means the world to us.